Chapter 1. Why Overwhelm Freezes You. Overwhelm is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not a lack of discipline. Overwhelm is what happens when the mind is asked to carry more than it was designed to hold at once. And when overwhelm takes over, action shuts down. The silent freeze. You sit there, knowing what you should do. The work is clear. The responsibility is obvious. The consequences of delay are real. And yet, you don't move. Not because you don't care, but because everything feels too heavy. Your thoughts pile up faster than you can process them. Your to-do list feels endless. Your mind jumps from one task to another without landing anywhere. So you freeze. This is not procrastination, as most people understand it. This is mental overload. The nervous system under pressure. When your brain perceives too much at once, it reacts the same way it would to danger. Fight, flight, freeze. Overwhelm often chooses freeze, not because you're incapable, but because your system is trying to protect you. Your mind says, "This is too much," so it shuts down movement to reduce stress. Scrolling, avoiding, sleeping, distracting, not because you're lazy, but because you're overwhelmed. Why big tasks feel impossible. A large task doesn't just represent work. It represents fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of wasting time, fear of not doing it perfectly. Your brain doesn't see you write a script or start a project. It sees everything that could go wrong. And when the mind sees too many possible outcomes, it chooses none. Overthinking is a defense mechanism. Overthinking feels productive. It feels like preparation. It feels like responsibility. It feels like intelligence. But overthinking is often avoidance disguised as control. You think because thinking feels safer than acting. Action creates exposure. Action creates risk. Action creates accountability. Thinking keeps you protected, and overwhelm feeds on that protection. The weight of everything at once. The mind cannot focus on everything. When you try to fix your life, improve everything, catch up all at once, your nervous system collapses under the weight. You don't need to fix your whole life, but overwhelm convinces you that you must, so you do nothing. The hidden shame of overwhelm. Overwhelm is often paired with shame. You think, why can others handle this? Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. You are responding normally to abnormal pressure. But shame adds a second layer of paralysis. Now you're not just overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed about being overwhelmed. And that deepens procrastination. Why willpower fails here. This is where most advice breaks down. Just push through. Just be disciplined. Just try harder. Willpower does not work when the nervous system is overloaded. Pressure increases resistance. Force increases shutdown. The more you demand action, the more your system pulls away. This is why traditional motivation fails overwhelmed people. Stoic wisdom. Control what is small and present. The Stoics understood this deeply. They never focused on the entire mountain. They focused on the next step, not tomorrow, not the outcome, not the full journey. Just this moment, just this action, just what is within reach. Overwhelm disappears when attention narrows. The brain craves completion, not perfection. Your brain does not need success. It needs progress. Completion, no matter how small, signals safety. This is why finishing a tiny task can feel relieving, while thinking about a big one feels crushing. Overwhelm is reduced not by ambition, but by movement. Why doing nothing feels easier, but costs more? Avoidance provides immediate relief, but it creates long-term anxiety. The task doesn't disappear. The pressure doesn't leave. The guilt grows. So tomorrow feels heavier than today, and the cycle repeats. Overwhelm feeds on delay. The real problem is not the task. The task is not the enemy. The enemy is how you frame it, how big you make it, how much meaning you attach to it. When everything feels important, nothing feels manageable. The beginning of freedom. Relief does not come from finishing everything. It comes from starting something small. Not to succeed, not to be productive, but to prove to yourself, I can move. That is the first crack in overwhelm. A truth you must accept. You cannot think your way out of overwhelm. You must act your way out, but not with force, with gentleness, with precision, with intention. This is where the 5-minute rule enters. Overwhelm does not mean you are broken. It means you are carrying too much at once. The solution is not to carry harder, but to carry less, briefly, intentionally, and now. You don't need to fix your life. You need to take the next small step. Chapter 2. Why motivation disappears when you're overwhelmed. Motivation is not broken. You are not unmotivated. What disappears when you're overwhelmed is not desire, it's clarity. And without clarity, motivation has nowhere to land. The myth of constant motivation. We are taught to believe that motivated people act effortlessly, that they wake up ready, focused, driven. This is a myth. Motivation is not a personality trait. It is a temporary emotional state. And emotional states are fragile under pressure. Overwhelm suffocates motivation because it floods a mind with too many signals at once. Why the brain shuts motivation down. Your brain's primary job is survival, not success, not achievement, not fulfillment, survival. When your brain senses overload, it prioritizes energy conservation. Motivation is energy intensive, so the brain shuts it down, not to sabotage you, but to protect you. Too many choices kill desire. Motivation thrives on direction. Overwhelm creates options without order. Too many tasks, too many expectations, too many decisions. This is called decision fatigue. When every choice feels equally important, the brain chooses none, and motivation evaporates. Why waiting for motivation makes it worse? Most people say, "I'll start when I feel motivated." But motivation is not the cause of action. It is the result. Waiting increases pressure. Pressure increases avoidance. Avoidance kills motivation. This is why motivation never arrives when you need it most. The emotional weight of expectations. When you attach high expectations to a task, you increase emotional load. Suddenly, the task isn't just a task. It becomes a test of worth, a measure of intelligence, a judgment of potential. The heavier the expectation, the more motivation collapses. Your mind avoids what threatens your self-image. Why you feel lazy but aren't. Laziness implies a lack of care. Overwhelmed people care deeply. That's the problem. You care so much that failure feels catastrophic. So the mind chooses inaction over risk, not because you're lazy, but because you're afraid. Stoic insight. Emotion follows action. The Stoics never waited for motivation. They acted according to reason. They understood something modern culture forgets. Action shapes emotion, not the other way around. When you move, the mind follows, not instantly, not dramatically, but reliably. Why small actions restore motivation? The brain releases motivation chemicals after movement, not before. Completion, even minor, signals progress. Progress signals safety. Safety allows motivation to return. This is why small wins matter more than big intentions. The trap of getting ready. Overwhelmed minds love preparation. Planning, organizing, researching. Preparation feels productive without risk, but preparation without execution becomes a hiding place. Motivation fades in endless readiness. Motivation cannot carry the whole load. Motivation is unreliable. Some days it shows up, most days it doesn't. If your system depends on motivation, procrastination is guaranteed. What works instead is structure and simplicity. Why discipline alone fails when overwhelmed. Discipline without compassion becomes punishment. Force creates resistance. The overwhelmed mind rebels against pressure. This is why gentle systems outperform strict rules. Lowering the bar to raise action. This is the counterintuitive truth. Lowering the bar increases progress. When the goal feels achievable, the mind relaxes. When the mind relaxes, movement becomes possible. Motivation returns not through hype, but through relief. You don't need more desire. You already want change. You don't need to want it more. You need to make it lighter, smaller, simpler, safer. This is where the 5-minute rule becomes powerful. The shift from emotion to process. Stop asking, "Do I feel motivated?" Start asking, "What is the smallest action I can take?" This shift removes emotion from the equation, and action becomes inevitable. Motivation disappears under overwhelm because the mind is protecting you. The solution is not to force motivation back. The solution is to act without it. Small action brings clarity. Clarity brings calm. Calm brings momentum. Chapter 3. The 5-minute rule, a doorway out of overwhelm. There's a moment when everything feels too heavy. The task feels too big. Your energy feels too low. Your mind feels too crowded. And in that moment, most people walk away, not because they don't care, but because starting feels impossible. The 5-minute rule exists for that moment. What the 5-minute rule is and what it is not. The 5-minute rule is simple. You commit to working on a task for 5 minutes, not to finish it, not to make progress worth showing, not to do it well, just 5 minutes. Then you're allowed to stop. No guilt, no pressure, no obligation to continue. This rule is not about productivity. It is about permission. Why the mind resists starting. Starting is the most painful part of any task, not the middle, not the end, the beginning. Because starting means crossing a psychological boundary. Before you start, the task lives in imagination, where it grows, distorts, and becomes threatening. Once you start, it becomes real, and reality is always smaller than fear. The brain's threat response to big tasks. When a task feels large, the brain reads it as a threat. It triggers stress hormones, self-doubt, catastrophic thinking. Your nervous system tightens. The body doesn't want to move. So you procrastinate, not as a flaw, but as a defense. The 5-minute rule bypasses this defense. Why 5 minutes works. 5 minutes is too small to argue with. It doesn't threaten your identity. It doesn't demand excellence. It doesn't require commitment. Your brain thinks, I can survive 5 minutes. That's all it needs. The psychology of low commitment. High commitment creates resistance. Low commitment creates openness. When the cost feels low, the mind relaxes. Relaxation allows action. This is why the rule works when motivation fails. You are not starting the task. You are starting the timer. This is crucial. The moment you think, I need to work on this task, resistance appears. But when you think, I'll set a timer for 5 minutes, the task disappears. Only time remains. This reframing removes emotional weight. What usually happens after 5 minutes? Here's the quiet truth. Most of the time you continue, not because you force yourself, but because the task no longer feels threatening. Momentum has started, focus has returned, and even if you stop, something important still happened. You showed up. Why stopping is part of the rule. Stopping is not failure. It is part of the design. The brain must trust that you're not trapping it. When the mind knows it can stop, it becomes willing to start again. Trust builds consistency. The Stoic principle at work. The Stoics focus on what was within control. 5 minutes is always within control, not the outcome, not the future, not perfection, just the next action. This keeps the mind anchored in the present. Why this rule rebuilds self-trust. Every time you start for 5 minutes, you keep a promise, not a heroic promise, a realistic one. And self-trust is built through kept promises, not big ones, small ones. Overwhelm loses its power when action begins. Overwhelm thrives in stillness. It feeds on imagination. Action starves it. The moment your hands move, your mind follows. The 5-minute rule creates that first movement. This is not a hack, it's a system. This rule works not because it's clever. It works because it respects human psychology. It does not demand transformation. It invites participation. When 5 minutes feels too much. Some days, even 5 minutes feels heavy. That's okay. Lower it. 2 minutes. 1 minute. The rule is flexible. The principle remains. Start smaller than resistance. Why perfectionism fails here. Perfectionism wants certainty. The 5-minute rule removes outcome thinking. You are not aiming to do it well. You are aiming to begin. Perfection loses its leverage. Action changes your inner state. After starting, you often notice. Anxiety decreases. Focus sharpens. Self-criticism quiets. Not because the task changed, because you did. The real victory is not productivity. The real victory is this thought. I can start even when I don't feel ready. That belief changes everything. You don't escape overwhelm by thinking differently. You escape it by moving gently forward. The 5-minute rule is not about doing more. It's about making starting safe. And safety creates momentum. Chapter 4. Why the 5-minute rule works on a deep psychological level. The 5-minute rule feels almost too simple. So simple that the mind wants to dismiss it. But simplicity is often where truth hides. This rule works not because it tricks you, but because it aligns with how the human brain actually functions. The brain is designed to avoid pain, not pursue growth. Your brain evolved to keep you alive, not ambitious, not fulfilled, alive. Anything that feels uncertain, effortful, or risky is flagged as a potential threat. Big tasks feel like danger. The brain responds by reducing movement. This is not failure. It's biology. Why overwhelm is a stress loop. When you feel overwhelmed, your brain enters a stress loop. The task feels too big. Stress increases. Thinking becomes scattered. Action feels harder. Delay increases stress. The loop feeds itself. The 5-minute rule interrupts the loop at the only place it can be broken: action. Lowering cognitive load. Cognitive load is the amount of mental effort being used. Big goals overload it. 5 minutes does not. When the load drops, the brain regains executive function, the part responsible for focus and decision-making. You don't need motivation. You need mental breathing room. The Zeigarnik effect. Why starting is everything. There is a psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. Once a task is started, the brain feels a subtle urge to continue, not because of discipline, because the mind seeks closure. Starting activates this mechanism. Waiting keeps the task abstract and threatening. Why time-limited action feels safe? Open-ended tasks feel endless. Endless feels dangerous. A clear end point creates safety. 5 minutes has a beginning and an end. Your nervous system relaxes when it knows this will be over soon. Safety enables engagement. The illusion of needing the right mood. Most people believe productivity requires the right mood, but moods are unpredictable. If action depended on mood, nothing consistent would ever be built. The 5-minute rule removes mood from the equation. You act first. Mood follows. Micro-progress rewires identity. Every time you start, even briefly, you reinforce a powerful identity. I am someone who acts. Identity is not formed by thoughts. It is formed by evidence. Small actions accumulate into self-trust. Why forcing yourself backfires? Force creates inner resistance. Resistance strengthens avoidance. The overwhelmed mind rebels against pressure. Gentle systems outperform harsh ones because they don't trigger defense mechanisms. The 5-minute rule feels like an invitation, not a command. The Stoic principle of voluntary discomfort. The Stoics practice small, controlled discomforts to build resilience, not overwhelming trials, small exposures. The 5-minute rule mirrors this wisdom. You face discomfort in a way that is survivable, and survival builds confidence. Why the brain loves consistency over intensity. Your brain values predictability. Small daily actions are easier to repeat. Large efforts create burnout. Consistency builds trust between you and your nervous system. Breaking the fear avoidance cycle. Fear shrinks only when faced, but it must be faced in manageable doses. The 5-minute rule gives fear no time to escalate. Before fear can grow, action has already begun. The role of dopamine. Dopamine is released not by success, but by progress. Even minimal progress triggers reward signals. This makes repetition easier. Motivation is no longer forced. It is earned. Why this works even on low-energy days. On low-energy days, your capacity is limited. 5 minutes respects that reality. It adapts to your state instead of fighting it. This is sustainable discipline. The difference between kindness and excuses. Some fear that this rule is too easy, but kindness is not weakness. Excuses avoid action. Kindness enables it. The rule does not let you off the hook. It gets you on the hook. Action shrinks anxiety. Anxiety thrives on anticipation. Action brings immediacy. When you act, anxiety loses future space to operate. The mind becomes present. Why stopping is a feature, not a bug. Stopping teaches your nervous system that action is safe. This prevents burnout, and burnout is the fastest path back to procrastination. The 5-minute rule works because it aligns with reality, not motivation myths, not hustle culture, not pressure, reality. Small actions, repeated, change everything. Chapter 5. Using the 5-minute rule when you're mentally exhausted. There are days when overwhelm is not loud. It is quiet, heavy, dull, exhausting. On these days, even 5 minutes can feel like too much. And this is where most advice completely fails. Because exhaustion does not respond to pressure. It responds to permission. Mental exhaustion is not laziness. Mental exhaustion is a result of prolonged effort without recovery. Too many decisions, too many expectations, too much self-criticism. Your mind is not avoiding work. It is asking for relief. Why exhaustion changes how you procrastinate. When you are exhausted, procrastination looks different. Not distraction, but numbness. You don't feel pulled toward entertainment. You feel unable to care. This is not a character flaw. It is nervous system fatigue. Why traditional productivity advice fails here. Advice like, push harder, discipline yourself, just do it, sounds strong, but it deepens exhaustion. Force drains energy. Gentle structure restores it. Redefining the 5-minute rule for low-energy days. On exhausted days, the rule changes. 5 minutes is not about output. It is about presence. You are not trying to be productive. You are trying to stay connected to action. Lower the standard without lowering the habit. This is crucial. You lower expectations, not consistency. You still show up, but you show up gently. No pressure to do it well. No pressure to continue. Just show up. The power of tiny rituals. Exhausted minds need rituals, not goals. Opening the document, sitting at the desk, touching the tools. These actions signal readiness without demand. The body follows ritual before intention. Why doing something small restores energy. Energy is not created by rest alone. It is created by meaningful movement. A small action tells your mind, I'm still capable. That belief restores energy faster than sleep. Stoic wisdom. Endure what you must, accept what you feel. The Stoics never denied fatigue. They accepted it without surrendering agency. They understood you can act without feeling strong. The 5-minute rule honors this truth. When even 5 minutes feels impossible, on the hardest days, change the rule. 1 minute, 30 seconds. You are not cheating. You are adapting. Adaptation is intelligence. Why momentum matters more than intensity. Intensity burns out exhausted minds. Momentum revives them. Small, consistent actions rebuild trust between effort and reward. Removing self-judgment. Exhaustion combined with self-judgment is dangerous. It turns tiredness into hopelessness. The rule works only when paired with compassion. No criticism. No punishment. The role of self-respect. Self-respect is built when you keep promises that match your capacity, not heroic promises, honest ones. The 5-minute rule creates achievable commitments. Why stopping after 5 minutes is success. Stopping when the timer ends teaches your nervous system, I am safe. This prevents burnout, and burnout is what fuels chronic procrastination. Overwhelm softens when you feel in control. Control does not mean power. It means choice. The choice to stop, the choice to continue, the choice to begin again tomorrow. This autonomy reduces stress. Action without attachment. On exhausted days, detach from outcomes. You are not building results. You are maintaining connection. That is enough. The long-term effect. Days like this don't define your productivity. They define your resilience. How you treat yourself here determines whether you return stronger or break down further. Exhaustion is not a signal to quit. It is a signal to simplify. 5 minutes or less keeps the bridge between you and action intact. And that bridge is everything. Chapter 6. When 5 minutes turns into momentum. Momentum does not announce itself. It doesn't arrive with confidence. It doesn't feel loud or powerful. It begins quietly with movement. Why momentum feels rare. Most people believe momentum is something you find, a mood, a burst of energy, a sudden clarity. But momentum is not found. It is created. And it is created the same way every time, through action. Why starting changes everything. Before you start, your mind is filled with imagined effort. After you start, effort becomes specific. Specific effort feels manageable. This is a turning point. The shift from resistance to engagement. Resistance dominates before action. Once action begins, resistance weakens. The mind shifts from, I don't want to do this, to, I'm already doing this. That shift is momentum's birthplace. Why 5 minutes often becomes more. When the timer ends, one of two things happens. You stop, and that's fine. Or you continue, naturally. Continuation is not forced. It happens because the task feels clearer. Anxiety has dropped. Focus has returned. Momentum is not effort. It is reduced friction. The role of clarity. Clarity follows engagement, not planning. Once you're inside the task, the next step becomes obvious. Overwhelm dissolves because the mind can see the path. Why momentum is fragile. Momentum must be treated carefully. Too much pressure breaks it. Too many expectations crush it. Respect it. Let it grow slowly. The Stoic approach to progress. The Stoics did not chase progress. They focused on consistent action. They understood what you repeat becomes who you are. Momentum is repetition, not intensity. Why you must not depend on good days. If momentum only happens on good days, it won't last. The 5-minute rule builds momentum even on bad days. This is what makes it reliable. Momentum builds identity. Each time you act, a belief strengthens. I am someone who follows through. Identity is the deepest form of motivation. It removes negotiation. Why you should stop while you still feel good. This sounds counterintuitive, but stopping while you still have energy leaves desire for next time. Burning out kills momentum. Leaving a little unfinished creates return energy. Avoiding the trap of overdoing it. Momentum does not mean doing everything. It means doing enough to keep moving. Overdoing creates backlash. Balance sustains progress. How small wins stack up. One 5-minute session becomes 10. 10 becomes a habit. Habits become identity. Identity becomes a life. No single moment changes everything, but consistency does. Momentum reduces emotional weight. Tasks lose emotional charge once they're familiar. Momentum creates familiarity. Fear fades when repetition replaces uncertainty. The quiet confidence that emerges. This confidence is not loud. It is calm. It says, I can start even when I don't feel like it. That belief is unshakable. Momentum does not mean speed. You are not racing. You are building. Speed comes later. Stability comes first. The point where procrastination loses its grip. Procrastination thrives on beginnings. Once momentum exists, it has nothing to attach to. The habit weakens. The cycle breaks. Momentum is not magic. It is movement repeated with patience. 5 minutes opens the door. Consistency keeps it open. Chapter 7. Why consistency beats motivation every time. Motivation is dramatic. Consistency is quiet. Motivation feels powerful in the moment. Consistency changes your life over time. And only one of them stays when things get hard. Why motivation cannot be trusted. Motivation depends on mood. Mood depends on sleep, stress, energy, emotion, environment. This makes motivation unstable. If your progress depends on motivation, it will collapse under pressure. Consistency does not care how you feel. Consistency works even when you're tired, you're anxious, you're overwhelmed, you're uninspired. That is its strength. Consistency is not emotional. It is structural. The Stoic view of daily action. The Stoics focus on duty, not desire. They acted because it was time to act, not because it felt good, not because it felt meaningful, because it was necessary. This mindset removes emotional negotiation. Why small daily actions win. Large efforts burn out. Small actions survive bad days. Survival creates continuity. Continuity creates growth. Consistency builds trust with yourself. Every kept promise, even small, restores trust. Broken promises erode self-belief. Consistency rebuilds it quietly. Why all or nothing thinking fails. All or nothing thinking leads to cycles of effort and collapse. Consistency rejects extremes. It favors sustainability. Habits remove decision fatigue. Habits eliminate the need to decide. No debate, no negotiation, just action. This reduces mental load dramatically. Consistency changes your relationship with time. You stop chasing urgency. You start respecting process. Time becomes an ally, not an enemy. Why consistency feels boring and why that's good. Boredom means familiarity. Familiarity reduces fear. Fear fuels procrastination. Consistency starves it. Progress is invisible until it isn't. Consistency compounds quietly. One day you realize you're no longer struggling to start. That is success. Motivation is a visitor. Consistency is a resident. Visitors are unreliable. Residents build homes. Choose what stays. The emotional stability consistency creates. You stop riding emotional highs and lows. You become steady. Steadiness is strength. You don't need motivation to change your life. You need consistency small enough to survive reality. Chapter 8. From Overwhelm to Self-Trust, the Identity Shift. In the end, procrastination is not about time. It is about trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your ability to begin. Trust in your ability to return, even after you stop. When trust is broken, overwhelm takes its place. Why procrastination is a trust issue. Every time you tell yourself you'll do something and don't, you weaken an internal bond, not dramatically, quietly. Over time, your mind learns. My intentions don't lead to action. And once that belief forms, starting feels pointless. This is the true cost of procrastination. Why big promises break self-trust. We often try to rebuild trust with big promises. I'll change everything. I'll wake up early every day. I'll fix my life this week. But big promises break easily, and each break deepens doubt. Trust is not rebuilt through ambition. It is rebuilt through reliability. The power of small, kept promises. The 5-minute rule works because it creates promises you can keep, not impressive promises, honest ones. And every kept promise restores confidence. Quietly, gradually, permanently. Identity is shaped by evidence, not intention. You don't become disciplined by wanting to be disciplined. You become disciplined by acting, even briefly. Your brain believes what it sees, and what it sees is action. From I can't start to I always begin. This is a shift, not overnight, not dramatically, but inevitably. You stop asking, can I do this? And start knowing, I always begin. That belief changes everything. Why self-trust calms the nervous system. When you trust yourself, your body relaxes. There is no panic, no urgency, no inner conflict. You know you'll act. Eventually, So overwhelm fades. The Stoic ideal of self-governance. The Stoics believed freedom came from self-command, not domination, not force, reliability. You act when you say you will, even briefly, even imperfectly. Why you stop needing motivation. When identity shifts, motivation becomes irrelevant. You don't wait to feel ready. You begin because that's who you are. The end of the inner argument. Procrastination thrives on internal debate. Should I start? Should I wait? Should I rest? Self-trust ends the argument. You already know what you'll do. Why overwhelm no longer controls you. Overwhelm loses power when you know you can respond. Not perfectly, not fully, but consistently. Control returns. The long game. This is not about productivity. It is about becoming someone you respect, someone who shows up, someone who keeps small promises, someone who moves forward, even slowly. You were never broken. You were overwhelmed. And overwhelm dissolves when trust is rebuilt, one small action at a time. 5 minutes is not small. It is the beginning of everything. Begin anyway. You don't need a breakthrough. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to feel ready. You've been waiting long enough, not because you're weak, but because you've been carrying too much in your mind. And now you know the truth. Overwhelm doesn't mean you can't act. It means you need to act smaller. You don't change your life by fixing everything. You change it by beginning. Not tomorrow, not perfectly, not confidently, just now. 5 minutes is not insignificant. It is proof. Proof that you can move even when your mind resists. Proof that you are not trapped by feeling. Proof that action still belongs to you. You don't need to win today. You need to show up. Sit down. Open the page. Touch the work. Let 5 minutes pass. And if you stop, stop with dignity. Because you kept your word. And that matters more than finishing. Momentum is not loud. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It grows when you respect your limits and still move forward. Again and again and again. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply standing at the beginning of a habit that will rebuild your confidence one promise at a time. So begin, not because you feel inspired, but because you trust yourself to start. And that trust, that is how everything changes.